being here. This is our Ohio Valley chapter of the American Medical Writers Association Career Panels event. We have a lot of people from all over, so that's fantastic. One of the perks of virtual events. My name's Ashley. I'm the president-elect of our chapter. Denise is also on. She's going to be moderating the Zoom. She is our treasurer. So to kick it off, I'm going to hand it over to India first to give a brief overview of herself and her career. And then after that, we'll go to Michelle, and then we'll have some facilitated questions for the panelists, and then we'll open it up to Q&A at the end. Go ahead, India. Thanks.
Okay, I'm India Crabtree. I'm really, first of all, happy to be here. I'm happy to have been asked to share this. I love just in general talking about this topic. I know that it's a hot topic on AMWA Engage on how to get into the field, how to progress, what types of medical writing there are. So I professionally am a principal clinical product risk scientist, which is the most um job title ever and I work for Boston Scientific and the equivalent to that job title would be principal clinical evaluation scientist, and I'll hopefully have a chance to get more into the variation of these titles later in the talk. um and I've been in the field for 5 years now. Yeah, for 5 years. And I love this work because it's a never-ending challenge. Um, Something fun that I like to do outside of work is fossil hunting, and I like to do that with myself, my husband, or my fossil club called the Cincinnati Dry Dredgers. So I'm in Cincinnati, and I work remotely out of Maple Grove, Minnesota, which is also it's a suburb of Minneapolis.
Awesome. Love the fossil name. Go ahead, Michelle.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Bloom, and I also am really honored to be here to be able to, talk about my career path and how I got to where I am and some tips that I have along the way. I live in California, and I have my PhD in molecular biology. After or during my PhD, I, decided I didn't want to continue to stay at the bench. Um, and so after I graduated, I ended up getting a position as a scientific writer in a research lab at Stanford. And I did that for a couple of years before I eventually transitioned to Natera, which is a diagnostics and genetic testing company. And that's where I am now. I've been there for about 4.5 years. I started as a medical writer. I still primarily do medical writing, but my position is manager of scientific affairs. I don't think I could narrow it down to one thing I love about medical writing, but I'll give you two things. One is that I really love the creativity, and that I get to think like outside of the box every day. And the second is that I get to learn every day. Um, so, those are two things that I really wanted in a career, and I found them. So that makes me pretty happy. And outside of work, well, I have two cats. Ashley knows. But I'm very excited because I'm going to start volunteering at the Humane Society soon in their kitten nursery, helping to take care of baby kittens, that were found on the street and kind of help nurse them back to health. So I'm very excited about that.
Love it. Thanks, Michelle. Um, okay, so we'll go ahead and get started with our facilitated questions. Um, we'll start with you, Michelle, and then India, you can chime in. The first question is why you chose a career in medical writing over other fields. And secondarily, were there any career opportunities that helped you make your decision?
Yeah, so I kind of alluded that during my PhD, I wanted to step away from the bench, and I actually went through a pretty, you know, uh, deep dive into what I wanted to do if I wasn't going to be at the bench. and how I decided what kind of path to take. Um, and this goes back to what we were saying at the beginning about what do you like writing about? And I do really like writing about genetics. So I was in a genetics lab and I decided that, I really love explaining genetics to people. And so, I thought about, a host of different careers where you basically get to, I call it translate or interpret, research and data into, something that's meaningful to other people. And, I thought about genetic counseling. I thought about being an MSL. Um, and I didn't really know that medical writing was a career. And I don't really remember how I kind of found out about it, but that seemed to be the best fit for me to kind of try out because I was like, okay, well, for to be a genetic counselor, I would have to go to more school for that. And I'm not not that I didn't want to do it, but I was like, I need to know that like this is absolutely what I want to do if I'm going to go to more school after my PhD. And then, MSL, it just didn't really seem like the right fit for me. Both I didn't necessarily have the expertise in a specific disease indication, since I was in a pretty basic research science lab for my PhD. Um, and I also didn't necessarily want to do as much traveling as they do. So I ended up starting to apply for writing jobs. And I just was like, you know what, we're going to do it. We're going to go see how long we go before, you feel like maybe you need that genetic counseling career or degree if that's the direction you really want to go. Um, so I'm still here. It's been, 6 years and I love it. So it turned out to be the correct path for me. But yeah, I did explore other careers, kind of all centered around a theme.
So I first became interested in medical writing, actually during a postdoctoral alumni career event panel that I attended. Um, One of the panelists, who was a medical writer at a local clinical research organization here in Cincinnati, introduced us to the term medical writing. Um, and this was actually my first time hearing that term or those two letters, I mean, two words. And so there was my first exposure to the field. And of course, it immediately intrigued me um, because I have a PhD in public health, and I was excited to discover that there was actually a field that actively seeks individuals with advanced scientific credentials. They're actually looking for people with PhD outside of the traditional professorship path in academia. Um, and at that time in my experience, it felt like opportunities outside of academia were often limited to laboratory work or government positions in public health, or even public policy roles in the STEM sector. So just learning that there is something else out there and is also a big field. Um, was so special and important to me. And it was nice to know that, hey, there is so much more out there than, what I've been taught. And it's not to the fault of, like any mentors that I have or professors. It's just you know what you know and you don't know what you don't know. So to be in a space where we have the opportunity to learn more about what was out there, that was really important to me and clearly had changed my life. So in order to deepen my understanding of the field, like I'm a natural researcher. So as part of my research and saying, okay, what is medical writing? So I did the typical Google, like I just outright Googled it. And when I typed in medical writer, I not only asked what it was, but I also wanted to know like what do they do, where do they work? So via Google search, not only did I, get all this information or get all these results that just, provide information on what a medical writer is and what they do, and where they work. But I also discovered or came across organizations such as the American Medical Writers Association, the European Medical Writers Association, and Regulatory Affairs Professional Society. So AMWA, EMWA, and RAPS. And so as a result of that, I eventually joined these organizations and I took targeted courses offered that they offered. And some of them were free and some of them were a fee, but um, I saw a huge opportunity there, so I really wanted to try. Um, and so not only taking courses, I also interacted with people in the field. So another thing about me is that I love to serve. So I joined committees, leadership positions. I attended events like this, and and I also took advantage of resources that were available as member with a membership through these organizations. Again, such as the courses, AMWA has a journal, the EMWA has a journal, RAPS has a journal. Like they all have their own journals. They all have blogs and material produced through their committees or special interest groups. Oh, and another one that I actually joined was the International Society for Pharmacoepidemiology because part of me also wanted to stay close to the epi field. Um, so, after while gathering all of that information and while still in postdoc, I, use what I learned to search for positions. Um, and it's sad that this is said, but I said this before in another setting, that non-academic careers are not alternative careers. They are just as much important a career pathway as any other. Um, and I really do appreciate this field because it does allow me to stay involved in research, which I am and always probably will be passionate about. But I also get to contribute in other ways that directly do save and enhance the lives of um, patients on a global scale. And because the medical devices or medical technologies that I work on do directly benefit patients all over the world. So I began my career when I applied for a contracting job, so the 1099 employee for an entry level remote medical writer role back in 2020. So yes, during the pandemic, and it provided me with a plethora of valuable insights and experience. And after 2 years of working in this role, I had the opportunity to work on various projects with two different medical device companies. I started with one company and worked there for a year, and then another one for the second year through this contract organization. And just that quick, which now I look back, that's like feels like lightning fast, but I actually was able to secure a full-time position where I am now as a senior scientist. And although that work was a grind, it was really hard. It definitely prepared me and propelled me to be ready for a position at a larger company. And not just a large company, but a leading company. And finally, I know I have a lot to say all the time, so I'll do my best to go too long, but I chose the regulatory medical writing pathway over other subfields um, within the medical writing field because there is a high ongoing and evolving demand for skilled professionals in this area. So I write clinical evaluation reports, post-market clinical follow-up reports, and other relevant documents that all propose unique challenges. It not only requires me to think critically about the data that we analyze, but it's also because regulatory requirements continuously change and evolve over time. And the dynamic, um, just the nature of this work just keeps me engaged, keeps me on my toes, and excited because of that. Like I'm happy that I'm doing something that is challenging. I like challenging things, but I also learn and gain a lot from it.
Lovely. Thank you both. Um, Really great insight. I appreciate hearing both of your career journeys. The next question is what qualifications are required for a career in medical writing? I know you both touched on this briefly, but I think we're all interested, one, in degrees for sure, and maybe any advice you have for people who don't have a higher academic degree. And then in addition to that, what skill sets and maybe certifications and things like that do you feel are required and advisable for pursuing medical writing? And we'll start with you, Michelle.
Yeah, so I would gather that the degree requirements are going to vary based on the different type of like medical writing career that you're going to choose. For the type of work that I do, which is really clinical research based, we're always looking for people that have an advanced degree. I think Ashley is actually the only person so far that has an MD. Everyone else has a PhD. I will say that they both bring, different types of value. We like the PhDs because we're primarily doing research based, we write up publications for peer reviewed journals, based on trials and studies. Um, and so having that research background, knowing how research functions, is really important. I think that, having an advanced degree, whether it's an MD or a pharmacology degree, I know that we have a bunch of people in our setting, maybe not in medical writing, but in other med affairs positions who have pharmacology degrees, just based on the types of, disease and indications that we're working in. Um, but I think that gives those types of advanced degrees give you more of the the clinical and disease aspect, right? So like I'm not a trained physician, so I don't know a lot about the actual diseases or what is happening in a clinic. I know how to do research, but so I ask a lot of questions, and we have medical directors that I talk to and sometimes ask very dumb questions about, what's going on when a doctor sees a patient so that I can get the context that I need for the writing. But I do think that some type of advanced degree in the medical or research field is pretty critical for those types of careers. I know that there are other types where that may not be a requirement, and I know that there are programs for medical, like graduate degree or certification programs for medical writing. Like I know UC Santa Cruz has one that's pretty well known. I don't know what it entirely entails, but I think you do come out with a master's at the end. That one, kind of when I was in my job search at the beginning and I was like, what do I need to do? I thought about whether that was something that I needed to go do. I will say that after I got my PhD, or while I was getting my PhD and thinking about my career, I very much didn't want to get into the trap of I have to get another degree in order to be able to be qualified to do something. I think that that's something that particularly women feel a lot of, like, I'm not qualified unless I've checked every single box. And I was coming out of my PhD after 6 years being like, certainly I must be qualified for something, right? Like this must have made me eligible to do something. So I was really trying to stay away from like feeling like I had to go get more training in order to be able to have a career. So I think all of that's to say that like there are going to be resources and degrees and additional training that may be needed in certain cases, but I certainly don't want people to feel like that is absolutely a requirement in order to be able to pursue these types of careers. Was there more to that question, or did I
No, that
get
was
to
that was perfect.
it?
And
Okay.
just by the way, we have one additional medical writer on our team who is also an MD, so we're diversifying a little bit. But
Yeah.
yeah, thank you so much, Michelle, and I'll hand it over to you, India.
Cool beans. I definitely second that. Like a lot of the job postings definitely ask, or they say prefer, not require, but prefer a PhD, PharmD, MD, something D, something something doctorate in those job postings. So do not let that scare you. My team consists of about 13 people, and we have a mix of big backgrounds and degrees. And we have two PharmDs, three PhDs. Um, and please forgive me if I'm not mathing right now, but and a few with bachelor's degrees. And it ranges from English all the way to yeah, pharma. Actually no, we have an MD too. So yeah, we're all over the place. We have an engineer, we're all over the place. And each of us brings something valuable to the team that is beyond just the project and like the CER or post-market clinical follow-up report. So much more than just that. It is not, we do not sit in silos. We really do work together and pull together to um, receive advice and to learn from each other. And I personally could care less what a person's degree is. If you're here, you got a lot to bring, you know what you're doing. Um, I appreciate that. Um, but I mentioned before my backgrounds in public health. Um, I pursued a PhD because I knew I wanted to get into scientific research, and I was very interested in epidemiology and public health education. The public health education piece because I learned a lot about, people and populations, and it helped to humanize the data. Um, and with that, I still carry that with me today, that all of the data points that we're exposed to, there are actual people behind those. And that keeps my ethics strong. Um, but yeah, so over time, like in school and postdoc and even my stint at FedEx, which I'll bring up later, I developed skills such as scientific research, peer review article publishing, project management, uh, having the background in science. So, thinking that way, thinking critically. There's those who are engineers. Again, they have a lot to contribute as well. Editing and even quality assurance. Those are all highly transferable. English. I mean, like I said, I have a diverse team, and across divisions, there are similarly diverse teams. Um, but my personal academic background, it does include working with patient data, such as like EHR data, like in our like Epic, electronic patient health record system. Um, my background in public health and like having a focus in this particular area, which for me would be oncology, but even more specifically, cancer survivorship. And also my interest in understanding how different ailments disproportionately affect vulnerable populations. I do have peer review publications and also newsletters. I don't have like 50, 60 publications, even 10 or 20. But I have published a few, and that did count. If I published three, that counted. Um, and also I'd say my 4 years of postdoctoral experience in a hospital clinical setting definitely helped a lot. And that's, where the exposure to the electronic health record comes in. Um, but even with all that, in my opinion, like a key attribute for success in this field is being open-minded. Um, so that would include like being receptive to change and being adaptable. In uncertain situations, such as shifting projects and project deadlines and assignments. You may have other smaller things that you need to do in between your projects, your primary work. And these changes are frequent and they arise for various reasons. Um, so being adaptable to these changes, and you will make mistakes, but that's okay. It's just, hold yourself accountable and learn from them. And, acknowledging that you make mistakes does help you to grow, and it also helps you to learn. And, and embrace any feedback that you receive. And it doesn't mean, you're it has like this major punishment or anything. I mean, there's a lot happening, it's a fast-paced environment, things happen, but you just, have to be ready to face that and take on the opportunity to correct any of those mistakes and it's okay. Just always know it's okay.
I love that. Thank you both so much. Um, the next question is regarding advice for building a portfolio for someone just starting out in the field. And we'll switch it up and start with you, India, and then go over to Michelle.
Okay, so my CV is very long. And it's very long because I literally threw the kitchen sink in there, dating all the way back to my undergraduate years. And I have that as a basis to pull from, pull out specific things that I have done that are relevant to the job of which I am searching for and applying to. This actually goes back to the first question that we were asked. And when I provided some advice about, job searching, studying what is needed was extremely important for me to know what I know, to learn what I needed to know or learn. I can't even put that into the sentences. Um, but it did help to guide my learning. That's what I want to say. Um, so anyway, this is why I have that detailed CV because over time I've done so much over the years, including my service in AMWA, that I learned does count in terms of the leadership aspect of things. I can pull from those experiences and say, hey, these are relevant for these reasons, not just because it's tied to medical writing, but because it I have gained skills and other important attributes to this position, such as working with different people, working on teams, being on a board. All that stuff does count. Um, but yeah, I included everything from and discussed in my interview. It may not all be like piled up on like the shortened version of my CV or resume, but I did um, at least in my interview, I talked about being a student manager when I was an undergrad at our recreation center. Um, while I was in my PhD program, I worked at FedEx full time while being a full-time PhD student. And I actually took on a package handler role and later a quality assurance administrator role. And I use all those previous experiences to demonstrate that, hey, I not only have academic experience, but I also have corporate experience, and medical device companies are big corporations. And there are things about working at a corporation that are relevant, whether I was at FedEx or, um, you know, J&J or Boston Scientific that you know are similar or relevant. So that was seemed to be something that the person who interviewed me liked. And on the academic side, I discussed my work on systematic reviews. Those were not published. I even talked about, things that I've done that didn't make, a journal publication, but I have done them, and this is what was good about them, like what I did learn from the reviewers, and as well as the scientific articles that I was able to publish, and even newsletters, especially if they were newsletters for scientific audiences. Um, and also have information on there about how well I work with diverse groups of teams from both the cultural and professional or concentration specific standpoint. So I'm hoping that my answer to this question helps you to see that it wasn't just or isn't just about the work or like the task at hand, but it's also, about how well I can collaborate with people, how I can adapt to various changing environments and requirements and deadlines, all that stuff, and how well I can respond to feedback, which we constantly get feedback. And in the moment, sometimes it can seem tough, but then you're like, okay, I'm glad that that happened because guess what? I'll be better in my next project. So,
Yeah,
Fantastic. Thanks. Go
and
ahead.
yeah, I think that that's a really good point, which is that, the getting the job is not solely based on, your writing ability and your writing portfolio. What I'll say is that, when I am looking at a candidate, when I'm looking at like their resume, I'm not necessarily going through and reading the publications that they've listed. It certainly is nice to see that there's a list of publications, and I'll say, I maybe evaluate like, um, you know, uh, n- try to understand like maybe what their role was in the writing, right? Like if there's 20 authors and you're author number seven, like you probably didn't do that much writing. But like if I see that you have a list of, five publications and you're first author on three of them, I'm like, okay, that person probably did a bunch of the actual work, like both with the writing, but then also the steps leading up to the writing in terms of the, evaluating the data and everything, right? There's so many things that go into the job that are more than just your actual writing skill. And we also, at my company, we have candidates do a writing test. And so usually what we'll do is we'll send them, the results section of a manuscript that is not published yet and ask them, or I think methods and results, and then ask them to write up an abstract, based on that. So you have to be able to, look at the results and the methods and say, okay, maybe what was the question that was being asked here, and then, write up a little intro for it, a little context and a little, discussion or conclusion about what they found from the study. And so that is something that we, evaluate. It carries a bunch of weight. Not only how well did you do the writing, but kind of, did you do some research into, what the disease indication is and what might be the questions in that field. Um, how well did you understand the data and the point of the analyses that were being done. So that to me is almost like a little bit more informative. And I always ask candidates what their process of doing that writing test was like. Um, what was I gonna say something about that? Um, I don't remember. I lost my train of thought. But so oh, that's the other thing is that we're not necessarily always looking for a person who can come in and be the perfect writer, right? Like we are looking for people who, as India said, like are adaptable and they can learn, right? And they can grow. So we look for potential, right? So you don't have to be the best writer. Um, that being said, like I said, like I do kind of look to see that there are publications, maybe how many, like where you are in the author list. But I think that the India also made another point, which is that not all of those things are going, like not everything that you worked on that is a valuable skill is going to be reflected in, something that's publishable or something you can put in a portfolio. So when it was actually right after I started my first job at Stanford, and a recruiter reached out to me actually from Natera, which is where I am now. And we had a long conversation because I didn't have an extensive portfolio and I had a hard time kind of finding jobs right out of my PhD. And, she wanted me to send my resume. And we also discussed where I was like, I've done a lot more than my resume says, right? Like I have edited people's, like my friends when I was in grad school, I would edit their grant proposals, I would edit their papers, their dissertations, things like that. I was like, that's not things that are, going on a resume. And so she asked me to write up a list of those. She was like, just, make a list of all the things that you think that you've done that maybe don't go on a resume and send it to me and I'll have it. Um, I don't know how much that ever went into consideration of whether I was, um, up for a good candidate for a position, but it was really nice that, she acknowledged that there are other things besides just the number of, publications that you list on your resume.
Yes. Yes, you hit the nail on that. Because it's true. Like there's just so much more than the writing itself, and how many articles you publish is for sure besides the point, which is why I made small mention of, yeah, like, but this wasn't published, or I only have a few publications. I don't have like 20, 40, 50, because it's besides the point. It's,
Yeah,
like, what did I learn from that? Am I showing that I can actually do that? Because I need to read articles, like the article that I wrote, I need to actually know how to read those and extract relevant information from them, knowing if this is a quality study. Um, Knowing it, like understanding, the study purpose, endpoints, population. Was the study design even appropriate? Like that sort of thinking, not just did you actually write something? It's more like, can you can you pull this apart if we gave it to you? So that writing test sounded great, actually. It sounds like it's so relevant. Like it really
right.
is. Like it may sound
Yeah,
daunting that you have to do it, but it's like, no, that was legit relevant.
right. And at the same time, right, having a list of, 50 publications doesn't mean that you wrote 50 publications, right? So I think it's not fair to hang everything just on that list right there. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yes, I remember that writing test. It was tough, but it's really a good test. Um, okay. So we just talked about the portfolios. I hope that was helpful for everyone. The next question that some of you asked is if the current job market is oversaturated, and if the industry has experienced similar competitive cycles in the past, and if you have any strategies during these challenging periods. And let's see, we'll start with you again, India.
So, and I'm being super specific about this because this is what I know about the most, because this is the only type of medical writing I've ever done. So I want to preface that, start with that. And so for med tech medical devices specifically, I do not believe that there is saturation in the market. Um, Most teams that I'm aware of, including my own, we're quite small for the number of products that we have. Our portfolio stretches well beyond 50 products just in our division. And for each product that is marketed globally, with uh, certification to be sold or marketed in the European Union, under the medical device regulation, which is, why post-market clinical follow-up reports and clinical evaluation reports are required. Um, the need for that expertise is actually under, it's actually the opposite, I think. The demand for these documents, um, is robust, and teams are small because the skill set is, it's it's it requires a lot of training for entry level, which I'm also very passionate about, and I love doing that. But I also have a lot to do, at the same time. But if our teams grow enough, we can have more entry level people and other people who are experienced and have like a good mix, like what our team actually has. So if anything, I think there's tons of room to grow. And with more and more medical device products coming, getting uh being released on the market, and those that are retiring, those need paperwork too. So there's a lot of opportunity out there, as medical devices improve. There's paperwork associated with that. So if there's a change of design, which I learn a lot about from our engineering teams, go engineers, um, that, it all requires paperwork. It all requires evidence. And I don't like to just say paperwork, it's evidence. The paperwork is evidence. It's clinical evidence to show if these medical devices are doing what they're intended to do, and if they are safe, if they are performing as intended, if they are used on a populations as intended. If there are issues, we need to fight, do root cause analyses, find out what's going on, why, um, were these used as intended, all these things. So with that said, I think there's tons of opportunity, and it's outside of just PMCFs and CERs, which post-market clinical follow-up reports and clinical evaluation reports. There's a lot of other documentation in addition to these. Are just the two primary. Um, So anyway, with that said, I guess that's the longest no answer of all time for the med tech sector. But no, there's plenty of opportunity for growth.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And my take on it is that I think this is a really new emerging field, right? Like I had not heard of this when I was doing my career exploration in grad school. So I think that it's new, and I think there's a lot of room to grow. I think India is correct as companies are evolving and going maybe into different, areas and having new products. There's going to be a continuing need for more and more of this. Um, I know, a lot of the larger companies, the Genentechs and Mercks and et cetera, like they have, internal writing teams. I don't know how extensive they are. At a place like Natera, which is smaller, I mean, it's a big company, but it's much smaller than places like Merck. Um, in the time that I've been there, we've gone from like 4 people to now we're at like 12 maybe, and hopefully still going to continue to grow. I don't know a lot of other, small to mid-sized companies that do have internal medical writing teams, but I do think that they're going to start popping up. And then there's also medcom agencies, which, um, you know, have tons and tons of writers. So I do think it's really undersaturated. I think especially as some of these smaller companies are going to realize that it maybe benefits them to have a homegrown, medical writing team internally, and to be able to grow that and keep that experience like in-house. I think it's just going to continue to expand.
Fantastic. So we'll start with you for this one, Michelle. What advice do you have for making connections and getting noticed in order to secure a position in medical writing? And maybe each of you can speak to the subspecialty of medical writing you work in.
Yeah, I mean, I think, for me and maybe a lot of you out there, it's kind of a transition as you're trying to get into this field because, you're not being trained specifically in medical writing, right? So it's that career transition that is difficult to make that leap and to kind of prove yourself. I will say that, and I don't know for whatever reason, when I was applying for jobs out of grad school, I was like, I really want to get to this medical writing place, but I'm not sure that I'm gonna immediately be able to jump into that. So I also applied for scientist positions so that I could kind of like get my foot in the door and then move around. And I think it showed in my applications that I actually really wanted the writing ones because those were the only ones I heard back from. And the scientist ones are like, yeah, we don't want you. And I was like, okay. So even though I don't have the experience, there's something that's speaking to this. So, I do think that, and I think it depends because I was very specific on like, I want to be in genetic testing. I don't care about going to a pharmaceutical company. And so my goal was to make the connections with that type of company. Um, so, it was a lot more going to, like we have a women in bio chapter in the SF Bay area. I went to some of those things for, um, panels that were focused more around diagnostics and genetic testing. I didn't do a lot of networking specifically through like AMWA or ISMAP, but I do know that they do have very great, networks and opportunities for those. And I think that if you're not familiar with ISMAP, it's the International Society for Publication Professionals. I think that's what it's called. And so, they have a job board and they have other, um, content as well. And so I think that both of those two venues are going to be good places to both learn about the careers, but then also, be around the like-minded people that, may know when, things are opening up. I mean, I will say from my experience in the job that I'm in, I don't think that the people that were hiring were really a part of those things. They weren't, so I wouldn't have necessarily met them and networked with them through the writing specific networking events. So that's why I think like, diversify and go to things that are about the field that you want to try to enter and meet people in a variety of different positions there, because it doesn't necessarily have to be that you make the connection with the person that's going to hire you, but you just want to get to know the company, where your place is in that company, and try to, everybody knows everybody, right? And if you talk to somebody who's in regulatory and you really want, medical writing position, they may be able to say, hey, I'm going to refer you to that person. So yeah, I think diversify in terms of that networking.
You reminded me actually of something that I forgot to mention when I was, harping on like doing your research, do your research. I actually forgot to mention that you not only want to research the role itself, but you want to understand the companies of which you want to work. So you also want to understand, like if you have no medical device background like I did, I had to research that. I had to understand like what exactly are medical devices, where are they being used, where are they being sold. Like I learned that there were differences in how the medical device classes are defined at the FDA versus the European Union. Um, like the European Union has class 2A and B, whereas FDA has class 2. Why is that? What's the difference? Things like that. So, because I'm on the regulatory side, there was a lot that I needed to learn there and understand why that mattered, with these different companies. Um, Understanding, what is the difference between Boston Scientific and J&J and Medtronic and Abbott and all these other companies. That's something that was asked in the interviews that I've had. They want to know like, what do you even know about this? Like, why do you even want to do this work? Like, is there something about it that you're passionate about? Um, this is our mission. Do you know anything about it? So those things are, equally, as important when doing your research. So now actually going to the question at hand. So to be recognized as a professional in the field, and again, this is me speaking from just my own passions and my own experiences, but I have seen benefits to this is to be actively involved in your organizations. Don't just join them and put them on your resume, like actually be a part of a committee, join a task force. You may not have to sign up to be a board member, but like what did you do? Like did you work with the board and other chapter members to be a part of, a new program or initiative? Did you serve as a presenter? Um, there's very various ways to get your name out there and network with people, and naturally, like it doesn't always have to be in like a formal setting. Just interacting with people through, your common interests and experiences is networking. But it doesn't have to be just this formal. I'm putting on my suit and tie and I'm going out here on the floor and I'm like, hey, here's my business card, here's my LinkedIn. It's not it doesn't is there's no one way to do it, and this for me personally is a really comfortable way to do it, to just have natural interactions with people and work towards common goals. So with that, I have served in various leadership positions with AMWA because I like leadership. I like leading and training people, which is why I gravitate towards this part of service. But I served as chapter president, treasurer. I served on a national task force, and I'm on the member engagement committee right now. Um, which is really cool, as well as I serve as a chapter advisor. So I love OVC, and after my tenure as a president, I was like, God, I still want to be do something, and chapter advisor was open, so I was like, yeah, I'll do that. So really really enjoy that. I also engage with the AMWA community through the member engagement platform. I share relevant content on LinkedIn, the OVC group page, as well as just my global network there. And I also like to do things like this, like present on panels and or roundtables. Um, and do what I'm doing now, just talking about my experiences and hoping that people can, really um, gain something from that and also just learn from, what I'm doing. And I've actually presented a lot. Like I told you, I put everything on my CV, like right when I'm doing it, or right before I do it, or right after. And I probably presented over 30 times and didn't even realize that. But I like doing that. Um, but in addition to that, you also want to have strong written and verbal communication skills, which enable you to convey the complex data. Because another part of my role too is like, again, I'm not sitting in a silo. I do work with people collaboratively, and they have questions. Some of my cross collaborators have questions and I have to be ready to answer them in a way that shows I also understand it. And if I don't understand it, I say, I know someone who does understand, and I will ask them and get back to you or just forward you the email. But it is important to have that analytical and critical thinking skills are are important. The critical thinking goes back to, like the peer review publications, understanding it's not just looking for specific data points, but things are not always fleshed out clearly in journals. There are really good articles, there are some bad ones too, and you have to be able to decipher the difference and pull out information sometimes by spending a little more time with that. Um, Project management skills, very important. I have a lot of projects, which they all come with deadlines and I have to be able to, you know, manage that. We have a project manager on our team, which is helpful, but I also am still responsible for knowing, what I have and when it's due and whom I need to talk to if I, if it gets tough. And and also being able to accept any feedback, that I receive. I really, again, I appreciate the feedback. The more mature and confident I get in my work, the more I'm like, okay, tell me what I need to do. Tell me, like, what did I do wrong? Or like, what did I do right? And why was it good? I do appreciate feedback and I look at that as an opportunity for growth. Um, but yeah, so that's what I got. And
I wanted to go off a couple of things that India said with, and one of them is like don't be afraid to use your network. First of all, like you get in what or you get out what you put in, right? So like she was saying, like be on committees and be on boards and stuff, right? You're you're gonna make those connections. You're gonna get your name out there if you're more active and you're putting in the work. And then don't be afraid to use those connections that you've made, right? I had a friend who was like, really bitter that somebody got a job over him, and he was like, well, it's because like they knew that person and I just, I didn't do that. I didn't put my name in with, the higher ups. And I'm like, yeah, but you could have done that, like that's how this works, right? So not to say that, you're not going to get a job by just cold putting an application in, but if you have those connections, use them. I get people contacting me asking me if I can, tag a referral to their application. I have people contacting me that, I haven't talked to or I barely knew in grad school. Like I, interacted with them a few times and they want to, hear what I do and they want to, talk to me about my job. Um, I I think that most people love being able to impart wisdom and help people out. So most people are going to be very happy to help you.
That's great. Thank you both so much. I have one more facilitated question, and this is kind of segueing a bit, potentially more relevant to people who are already in medical writing. But some people were curious about the best AI tools for medical writers, in your opinion. Um, and we'll start with you, Michelle.
Okay. I've only like really recently gotten into using the AI tools. So at Natera on our company, on our medical writing team, we have a product called Scite, SCITE. We did a lot of research into, you know, a product that was specific for writing research papers, that was going to be transparent and that wasn't going to make stuff up. And so Cite is really nice because it gives you the list of publications that it queried, that it cites everything that it puts out for you. You can easily go look up those papers. So that's really nice. I do honestly use ChatGPT a lot. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I think that you have to be critical, right? I would never necessarily take something that ChatGPT spat out and say, "Oh yeah, that's the truth," and like stick it in a paper. But I think that it can be really good for kind of guiding you in the right direction, giving you themes. I recently had to write a paper on something that I really, one of the subject matter experts that I was supposed to work with really just kind of dropped the ball and wasn't helping me at all. So I was like, okay, I kind of have to, figure this out on my own. So I did a lot of chat GPT, to kind of get summaries of, challenges in this particular field or whatever. Certainly I always would fact check and try to find the references on my own to cite that. It was a little bit easier because I was familiar with the field a bit. I just didn't have all the specifics. So I don't think there's anything wrong with ChatGPT, if you're using it in the correct way. And yeah, other than that, like I don't have that much experience with a bunch of other products, so that's really all I can say about it.
Yeah, so I think and I agree with everything you were saying. And as you can see there's a lot of AI tools out there available. And with that it's important to know like what your intent is with these and um not just knowing that, hey, there's these tools out here, but what are they best for? Because they are all different. Some of them are targeted, just like Site, like that is, like that has a targeted AI model. I I actually use Copilot to help me with various tasks such as crafting emails, make sure that my tone's appropriate, make sure that, like, let's say I write an email that's very long. I want to shorten it, but I want to summarize it with the key points that I wanted to make. It's helpful with that. Um, so like editing, refining sentence structure. Um, and and one thing I really want to emphasize is that, especially when you're working for a company like where I'm at, do not put anything that is confidential or company specific in there. You want to pretty much keep it general and to the point. Like, what are you trying to accomplish overall? And you can probably, and you can, not probably, but you definitely can do that without throwing in that information. Like product spec information, things like that. You don't, no, 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 no. Do that. Um, I use it to help stay organized. Like I actually asked it to create a table. Like I wrote a bunch of stuff down. I asked it to put it in a table format in Word, and that was really cool. And also I ask it questions to generate ideas for tables, and I may even ask it if a new regulation came out that has, you know, that I need to know. And I also fact check that, of course. Michelle said it right. Fact check, fact check. So you can ask it questions all day, but you still want to verify. And again, it's part of like with us being researchers, it's like, well, of course we're going to do that. You go to fact check, but I highly recommend that. But yeah, there's various tools out there, and again, I highly caution using anything just to use it. Just make sure you're doing it with intent and purpose, and then I think it can work for you and be positive. It's not an intent would not be write this whole article for me or don't have it do your job. That is not what it's intended for. It will not do it well anyway. Like so I would not recommend that, but just maybe help it help you. It's supposed to be your assistant. It's supposed to be there to help you improve a specific function, but not, but I'm not an AI expert. I'm saying all this. I'm not an AI expert, but I have, you know, put a lot of time into learning, and our company emphasizes the importance of it and just learning it, understanding it so that we can use it responsibly. Um, so yeah, AI is cool and it can be helpful, but it can also be messy if it's not used as intended. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I agree with that, that like, you really hit on a good point, which is about like, what are you specifically using it for? And you're not going to ask it to write you a whole paper. One of my coworkers one day was like, do you think that we're going to be replaced by AI? And I was like, oh, absolutely not. Like that is not going to happen. It just doesn't have the capability, like I think that it is really good for summarizing, for maybe picking out themes, right? Giving you something to go off of if you're having writer's block and you're starting on a blank page. Um, but it's not going to, do what you do, right? Like you have your brain for a reason, you've been trained for a reason, you critically think for a reason. And you're always going to do better than it. I am waiting for the day when I can give it a bunch of like, results and it can spit out a results section for me, because I do think that a lot of that is like you already know what the results are. It just has to be put on a page. But I think India made a really good point, which is like you don't want to be giving these things like proprietary data. And my company actually has a pretty strict policy about that. They've loosened up recently, I think, with getting some Chat GPT APIs, but before they were like, no, like don't do any of this, like and certainly don't feed it any data. So yeah, so you have to be pretty cautious about the ways in which you're using it, especially if you're at a company, and what their regulations are around that.
Lovely. Okay. Thank you both so much for taking the time to answer those questions. Now we're going to open it up to some audience Q&A. I think it's best to do this either using the raise hand feature and I'll call on you, or you could put the question in the chat and I'll call them out in the order that we get them. I did want to start the Q&A with a question that I have, which is any opinions or advice either of you or both of you have about writing using inclusive language and writing about diversity, equity, and inclusion in light of recent governmental changes.
That's a really good question. I haven't necessarily thought about it in terms of the most recent regulations, that are happening, or changes that are happening, and how our writing could be affected by that, like with the scrubbing of certain language, right? Like, do you want to try to avoid using certain terms? I haven't necessarily thought about that, and I would beg to say like probably don't, because I think that I don't know. I just think like it's so hard to write about biology and, medicine and genetics without talking about diversity, right? Like that's it's just inherent. Um, I do there are some really good you know publications with recommendations that have come out in the last 10 years about using inclusive language, right? So, really being aware of gender versus sex, race versus ethnicity, not just lumping everyone into like other, right? If they're not, white or black, right? Um, and then there's a lot of inclusive language about, just in terms of, yeah, Dr. India said, I really remember that every single data point is a person. And I think that that's so important because, you know, I do get feedback on my writing, right? I'm not perfect. And so, I had somebody come back, a medical director come back to me and say, we really should say individuals instead of patients, right? Remember, these are people, they're not just a person in a doctor's office, right? So I think that there's a lot of inclusive language that needs to be used more that isn't, right? Even there's a lot of you know, new changes in terms, right? Like you don't, call people alcoholics, right? Like you say like people with a substance abuse issue or something like that, right? Like there is inclusive language. I think we should be using it. I think that there needs to be more education around using it. Um, and right now, I'm not concerned about changing the way I write to fit in with any sort of changes that are going on at the government level.
So for me, because of the type of documents that I write, that's not even something we really have discussed, like specific to our reporting because they're global documents. So those, like the US regulation doesn't necessarily apply to the European Union one. But also what I write is not like we don't it's hard to ex no, I don't know, it shouldn't be hard to explain, but we don't really, it's not that type of writing, I guess, in that like we have specific data points um that do capture patient characteristic data, but because these aren't reports that are looking at specific like health disparity base type of information, like we're not reporting on a health disparity or an underserved population explicitly, even though our device may be for that populate. You know what I mean? So it's I don't like we don't actually have to, and it's always been like this, policy or not. It's just this is just how the the templates of the documents are set up. But if we did need to do that for any reason, if something were to change down the line, again, it's a European regulation document, not US based. So yeah. So I hope that makes sense. And then I answered it. I tried to do it carefully. I'm not saying, no, we don't care about that. That's not true, but it's just not what's asked.
That makes perfect sense. Nakia, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, so I have a curious question. Before I knew medical writing was an actual career, I got my bachelor's back in 2001. And I used to actually, my classmates used to actually pay me to do their research and write papers. Do you think that's something appropriate to say in an interview just to exemplify that you got good writing skills? Oh,
I think probably that's okay. Yeah. I mean, first of all, that's freelance, right? It has a term. So you don't just have to
okay.
say, people were kind of paying me. You just, yeah, I think you could say you did freelance work. And then I think it's also, it's experience. You learned through it.
Okay.
You improved as, a writer, as a researcher through it, right? So I think it's fine. I mean, I haven't necessarily had to bring up in interviews, right, that like, oh, I would edit people's, my friends like grant proposals and whatever, but I wouldn't
Mm,
shy away from saying that I've done that, right? Especially if it's relevant to a certain skill that you're trying to show that you have.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I
Mm,
haven't, I'm a technical leader, so I think that Michelle is most appropriate to answer that question, but I actually don't disagree with what she is saying. That makes sense. I mean, it is essentially freelance. But I think maybe the framing of it. So was it um so like writing for someone or like editing their papers?
I was actually writing it.
Mm.
Yeah, I think this
Yes.
is actually a good point. I don't know if it's something that you ended up having a name on or whatever, but this kind of reminds me that, there are I don't know that it's such a concern now, but I remember when I was starting to look for jobs and I didn't really understand medical writing, right? And the question that I had was like, am I essentially going to be ghost writing for someone, right? Like, am I going to be writing this and my name's not going to go on it, right? Because if my name's not on it, I can't put it on my resume and I can't say it's mine, right? And I
Hmm.
think that this is a good example of that, where if you were doing the writing for them, as I think India's correct, like, the framing of it, right? Say that it was more freelance work. But I think even if you were doing the writing and your name wasn't on it, I think it's still appropriate to talk about that as, an experience. And I don't know if I would put it on a resume if your name wasn't on it, but to certainly in some place indicate, that I did ghost writing for this,
Okay.
publication. Yeah.
So that's more ghostwriting, not freelance.
Well, the freelance is kind of saying that, like, I was kind of, doing this on my own. I wasn't part of a company, but the ghost
Hmm.
writing is more of the idea that you're writing something, but then your name is not, you're not being put as an author on it. You're kind of invisible, right?
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah. Hmm.
Thanks, Nakia. That was a great question. Mary, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, hi, my name is Mary. I have a PhD in biomedical engineering. I'm currently doing a postdoc, and I'm trying to get into medical writing. I'm kind of open to, I think I'd prefer medical communications, but I'm also open to like, yeah, more regulatory writing as well. I've done like 50 informational interviews. I've like applied online. I have like a pretty good resume. I have like some mentors who are in medical writing who have looked at my resume. Any suggestions for like just, should I keep applying? Like, should I try to keep networking? I've been looking at like I've mostly been applying or like looking for jobs on LinkedIn, but I just joined AMWA and I'm trying to see if there's different networking opportunities there. So if you have any suggestions like how to use the website or like how to do the networking on AMWA, that would also be helpful too. Thanks.
So, so what I use LinkedIn for is to share positions, and I do actually talk to a lot of people who reach out to me on there because it's just what I like to do because I'm it is hard to get into the field. It is. I don't actually know why. I just know for some reason it's really competitive. Um, and but what I have noticed too is that a lot of the roles that are posted are like senior and above, or like and if
Mhm.
you don't have any experience, it's even harder to get those. But um, I haven't actually applied for any positions through LinkedIn. I've applied through the actual company's website and or reached out to a recruiter. I think recruiters are your best allies, specifically talent specialists. And if they post a position online or their names listed, you can reach out to them and you can ask them questions, tell them who you are, or like let's say a role is posted and it's for um like a senior level and above, but um you still want to do the like get in, like what if maybe they can offer it at like a level two and then you work your way up quickly to that, like there are ways around it, but um I think recruiters are your best allies. My experience has been my best results have come from actually talking to them, and setting up a call, not just emailing, but like I may message, like start with that, like message them through LinkedIn and or their email, and then set up an actual call, like a Zoom call, like where they can see me and go from there. And that has definitely helped. But just sending applications without having talked to someone first, I think you unfortunately get, lost with everything. Even though you're highly qualified, you can do it. You just need to start with something. Um, that I think that is very helpful. At least again, I always say in my experience because I know there's not like a one size fits all, but I do think it was helpful to have that interpersonal interaction with someone at the company that can actually answer my questions about the company and more about the role than was posted in the in the job description. Because there's always a lot of stuff in the job description, but there's only like a fraction of that that's actually like, yeah, we're probably going to interview you about like five of these things, So yeah, that's what I recommend. I hope
Yeah,
that helps too.
I 100% agree with that with the recruiters. The job that I have now, I mean, I've been in my company for 4.5 years, but I followed up with this with the recruiter for like 2 years before I got the job that I had. Like I made the connection with her. And then every time she posted a job, I both messaged her on LinkedIn and sent her an email. And I was like, do you think I'm a good, fit for this position? Because I think that's the other thing is like by talking with the recruiter, you get the chance to kind of take yourself off of just the paper, right? And when you're making that transition, it's hard because your resume maybe doesn't look like you're fit for that position because if you're in biomedical research, you have a lot of bench experience, maybe, right? And maybe you have written a couple of papers, but it doesn't show that like I, I have a passion for this, for writing, and that like I've done extensive writing. So I think that that gives you the chance to be able to add some color to your profile by talking with that recruiter in person. And then you got to be persistent, right? Like I know that when I was first looking for my first job, I probably put in like 100 applications, didn't hear from most of them. And then to get to my second job, it was the persistence of really following up with this recruiter. Um, and then the other thing that I might also suggest is I think, a lot of people say like a cover letter is not really necessary in industry. I do think that there are times when a cover letter can be really helpful. I just had one of my friends from grad school, apply for a job at my company and she just joined. She just started working with Ashley, but she sent me her resume and I've known what she's been doing for the last 8 years that she's at her company. I know that she's been doing a lot of writing, but I didn't feel that it really reflected in her resume. And I said, I think in this case you might really want to write a cover letter because I think it's really going to add, like, I know that your experience fits very well with this position, but I don't think that's going to come through in your resume. And I think you should write a cover letter.
Thanks. Yeah, I do have a cover letter, which is I think a
Okay.
good suggestion. Yeah. Yeah. And I will definitely reach out to recruiters. I think, yeah, I've been applying through like the websites on but not always reaching out to the recruiters and sometimes they don't reply, but I'll definitely keep trying to do that or like trying to talk to people and see if they have recruiters that they know. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough. I'm not gonna lie. So I think, keep your spirits up and you just need one opportunity. And it will come.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So it's just best to stay away from quick apply when you get to LinkedIn. Because like on my LinkedIn pages, I always get notifications about medical writing positions. And I would read the description and then I would just hit quick apply and send my resume. That's not the right way to go. I need to talk to the recruiter first before I do quick apply.
Yeah, I mean, you could do the quick apply and also reach out to the recruiter, right?
Oh,
I
okay.
don't think it necessarily has to be in a particular order. But yeah, I mean, I've done that too, where I'm just like, okay, check, like I did it. But I think again, it's like the amount of effort, you get out what you put in. So I think,
Mm-hmm.
really just being like, okay, I'm gonna like hit this button and it's gonna be done. I really think that equates to, maybe why you're not hearing anything back, right? I think putting in
Yeah.
a little bit more legwork. Yeah.
Yeah, and also too, what I've learned is on LinkedIn, those jobs are may not even be available still sometimes, and they can be really late at pulling them on, like pulling them down. And even if you hit quick apply, you probably still want to go, well, even before you do that, go on their website to see first if it's even still available and probably just apply through them. I think
Okay.
Yeah.
because you go directly into their system. It depends on the company to really know who keeps up with that or not. Some companies keep up with LinkedIn and actually do use that. Some do not. Indeed is still a great platform. That's actually where I got my first contract job was through Indeed. For some reason, have a lot of contract roles for this, for
Hmm.
different types of medical writing. So LinkedIn is the popular one, but it's not the only one.
Mm-hmm.
And but yeah, I do like to go directly to company websites to truly know what is actually available. But my company is a tiny, I mean, it was a not where I'm at now, but where I started off at, it is a really small company and they only use Indeed and LinkedIn to hire. So if you're looking at starting off as a contractor, which for me was really good before going to a big company, um, it's even more fast paced than I realized. It was really fast paced because there's even less people on the team. Um, that yeah, the you will discover a lot of companies through there. And if you look through your directory in AMWA and just see where people work, you learn about even more companies that you never even heard of. And there are people who
Wow.
are members of AMWA who are actually CEOs and owners of like these smaller organizations and LLCs that you can actually reach out to and see if they need anybody. So there's various ways, like outside of just like don't wait for a job posting. Sometimes you just need to just outright reach out to people and see maybe they post more in the spring, maybe they post jobs more in the winter. And there is actually a season for when jobs get posted too. So, but you only know that if you have these conversations with people and put the time aside to study. Like that was when I say I do research, I mean, I literally carve like a couple of hours out and just study like, okay, what companies are available? Is this are these companies in alignment with what I'm interested in doing? Do they actually offer the jobs that I want? You know, and also
Mm-hmm.
companies don't seem to like when people apply for all kinds of jobs just to be at that company. They don't, it's not always, oh, you just need to get in. You need to get in strategically. Don't apply for a job that is so far away from anything you may want to do, or there's no trajectory or a way to pivot to that. Like, don't apply for an engineer, a scientist, a mechanic and just like you also don't want to be all over the place. Like your search does need to be focused and strategic too. So and again that has helped a lot. Has helped me a lot.
Yeah. I would say though that in your searches, like probably keep the term search broad because I don't think that there's like entire consistency across like what positions are called at different companies, right? So like, you know, it could be medical writer somewhere. It could be technical writer somewhere, although to me, technical writing is very different. Again, read the post. Um, it could be scientific writer, so there's a bunch of different terms that it could be. So keep that search broad. And then, back to what Mary was saying in her situation, she's done a lot of informational interviews. I think, keep up with those, right? If you talk to someone and they're like, oh, well, like we're not really hiring right now, like check in 6 months and be like, so like, you hiring now? Do you think you're gonna, get anything coming along, right? Then you're kind of staying fresh in their head, but also like if you're not seeing anything, you may be able to anticipate when they might be opening up the positions that you're looking for, or at least get a roadmap of like, okay, maybe this company is not hiring this year. So maybe I'm just gonna, go a different way for a little while and not give up hope, but like I understand why they're not hiring and, come back a little later. Yeah. So
Okay.
there's a lot of information you can get from, talking with people and following up on those connections.
Okay.
All righty, we're right at time, everyone. Thank you all so much for your questions, and a big thank you to India Michelle for the wonderful insights.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And, I love talking about what I do and how I got here. And if, anybody ever has any questions or needs some help, feel free to reach out to me.
Ditto.
Sure. Thank you,
Thank you so much.
ladies.
Thank
All
you, and
right.
we're
Thank you.
Thank
available.
Take
you.
care, everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.